Welcome everybody to the Jones Girl Live, and I gotta find my camera. I'm always on the wrong side. Good. I am your host, Kiara Jones, and I'm just been graced with this wonderful, wonderful presence, Miss. Well, she's a therapist. I was getting ready to call you doctor, but
Not
she's a
yet.
licensed. Not yet. She working on it, but she is a licensed therapist with the state of Chicago. Miss Devona Aline. Say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be with you today. Just overflowing with joy with just the presence and then what we're going to discuss for sure.
Yes, yes, yes. So this is part two of the sexual assault in the mega church. But and
Hmm.
not even the mega church, just church in general. Yeah, it's small churches do this. But my guest yesterday was abused by her youth pastor, and consequently, the church backed him, even as he continued to stalk, even as he continued to uh, harass, even as he continued to do things. The church that the young lady was participating in and was a member of were well aware of his antics, and they actually had her removed from the church. And this is unfortunately a very common thing that happens in the body, because this is not the first time I've ever heard of a situation like this. And in your field and area of study, I know you've heard of this all the time. So can you kind of give us, first of all, let's hear a little bit about your background and kind of what you specialize in first.
Sure. Well, let me start with my religious background. I grew up in a very I would say conservative denomination. I grew up Primitive Baptist, and of course, in that denomination there was no licensing or ordaining of women. And so, through my journey with that as a background, I evolved to what I would consider a freer way to worship or a freer denomination. So I am an ordained Baptist minister now, with a divinity degree and a degree in counseling. And my degree was spiritually integrated. So I've brought psychology and spirituality together. With that, a lot of my work is in trauma, and I have expertise in sexual assault counseling. And even with that, I've had to deal with this dichotomy of, okay, where does my faith come in if I've been assaulted? And within our churches, we have a lot of shame around anything related to sexuality. So, adding assault to it, where something happens without somebody's consent, where they're not old enough to give consent, something we forget about,
Yeah.
and they don't give consent because it's a violent sexual assault. We just don't know what to do with it because of that sexuality shame, because of that lack of knowledge on sexuality and what's appropriate. In our churches, we do what anybody does. We just kind of shove it to the side. So, a lot of the work that I've done as a therapist has been advocacy based in trying to really educate people, educate Christians. What is rape culture? Is it in the church? What is patriarchy? What is this subordination of women? I think when we highlight those kinds of things, it becomes easier to have these conversations and then to keep people safe, and not just young women safe, but young men, anybody safe in the church where it's supposed to be a haven. We want to maintain that, but we can't do it without talking about some of these issues of sexual assault and even sexual coercion and harassment.
Right. Okay. So with that, you gave me a list. You just gave me my bullet points of how we just gonna go right on down, because you're talking about just the power structure and the culture of it. Can you put into words, when we talk about the fusion of the church
Hmm.
and the rape culture that is present within the church? And let me give a caveat here. Let me
Sure.
say this, because I'm a preacher, you know. And so the Bible says that the gates of hell will
Hmm.
not prevail against the church. When
Hmm.
the church is built on the revelation of Christ,
Hmm.
I am an advocate for the church. I am God's ecclesia. I am a proud member of the body. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
But as a proud member of the body, we have been put on watch. And notice when God starts to ring the alarm, hey, I'm noticing this behavior. And the ones that I have put on watch, my intercessors, my preachers, my fivefold ministry, whoever, the
Mm-hmm.
ones that I have put on watch have not been on watch. And so, because we haven't been on watch, and because we have allowed, see, these are things that we have given permission, according to Revelation chapter 3. So I want to make sure that I give some scriptural basis for what it is that I'm talking about, and
Yeah,
scriptural basis for my argument as
absolutely.
how God feels about sexual promiscuity, sexual assault. And God made it very clear. It's better for you to tie a millstone around your neck
Mm-hmm.
and throw yourself off a bridge and be
Yes.
cast into the deepest part of the sea than to offend my least one. So I know God's heart when it comes to sexual assault,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, doing it, especially when you're dealing with children, assault,
Yes.
period. And then when you use his name and you use scripture to try to cover up and whatever, God is not in agreement with that. So I just wanted to set that stage.
Yeah.
So I would like for you to talk more about just the culture of the rape culture that seems to be present in the church right now.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start by acknowledging that everything outside of the church is also inside of the church because church is a microcosm of the world, right? And we never will have a perfect church until Jesus comes back and makes it so, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got your Peters and you got your Judases. You got the
Mm-hmm.
people who want to do right and just can't,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got the people who are going to do wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because I love the church and I love our people, I recognize that there are probably more Peters than there are Judases, but the Judases
Mm-hmm.
do exist.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who are on watch, but they don't do anything with what they see. And that's the problem. And again, maybe they don't know, or maybe they're deliberately trying to cover it up. For the
Okay.
and so I'm speaking more for the people who don't know. We already know what to do with the Judases, right?
Right.
It's the Peters that we're conflicted about, and those are the
Mm-hmm.
people who operate in conflict. And
Mm-hmm.
perhaps I make up that they think that keeping watch is seeing it and not letting anybody know what's going on because that will tarnish the image. And we just bought a house this year, and because I love our house, I go around looking for things to make sure that they're clean. And I tell
Mm-hmm.
my husband, hey babe, this needs to be cleaned up. We need more people looking at this thing that we love, this body of Christ, and pointing to what needs to be cleaned up, because some of this we can't do on an individual basis, and I think that's what we've been trying to do. We've
Right.
been trying to do it on an individual basis. Let me clean this up, put it aside, and we need to point it out for the entire body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, pointing it out will step on some toes because we're thinking just about an assault, we're thinking just about molestation, we're thinking just about harassment, but we're not looking at the beginnings of it.
Mm-hmm.
When we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about a culture of violence, we're talking about sexual violence too. And we don't seem to recognize that some of the rules we have about what women should do and how women should dress and how women should be, that is the beginning of gender and sexual violence,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So
Because,
that if you show too much shoulder, it might
yeah,
it's gonna turn out. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
absolutely. Forgetting that God created us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So God created us and said it is good. But yet,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to certain people's bodies, not everybody, right? Because I've
Mm-hmm.
never ever heard a sermon on what kind of suit a man should wear.
Mm-hmm.
Never ever heard
Mm-hmm.
that before.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to certain people's bodies, those things are deemed evil. So you got to
Mm-hmm.
cover up your shoulder because po man over here can't function.
Right. I
And
got
we accept that as
you.
truth. We
Right.
accept, for whatever reason, because of the culture of patriarchy, we
Mm-hmm.
accept that men can't control themselves, and so the responsibility is actually on women to maintain this control of men.
Right.
So when we're
Got
talking dress codes, when we're talking roles, I told you I grew up in a conservative church where they're working on it, but women are still subjugated as
you. Mm-hmm.
if men are automatically better. We
Mm-hmm.
have misinterpreted what it means for a man to be the head of the household. We've misinterpreted what it is to submit to your spouse. And because of that, we've elevated men and then denigrated women. And because we have that power structure, that means whoever's up here has full license and has every right to oppress in some way the people down here, and that happens to be women. So that's where we start with
Mm-hmm.
rape culture and patriarchy in the church. Because
Mm-hmm.
from that patriarchy, that rape culture, now when a man sexually assaults a woman, a young girl, it's not the man's responsibility. It's what was she wearing? What was she doing in his office? What did she talk to him? Did she like him? Let me say this about any type of physical contact. You should be able to wear what you wear without being assaulted. Nobody gets
Mm-hmm.
dressed in the morning to go to church, go anywhere to say, oh, I'm going to be assaulted today.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing that should happen if you wear a short skirt is the wind might blow it up. That should be
Mm-hmm.
the worst thing that should happen. If you have a crush on somebody, the worst thing that could happen is you get embarrassed if they find out. Having a
Mm-hmm.
crush, wearing something, does not mean now you're going to get assaulted. I've
Mm-hmm.
talked a lot. I want to give you a minute to jump in.
No, 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 you good. I'm telling him to say, okay, I'm telling Stacy I'm gonna have her to come in too. No, I love everything that you're saying because
Mhm,
I do think we have to root out the foundation of how these things come into play,
mhm,
how these different ideas. How is it that it is the victim's responsibility, the girl's responsibility, and everything is put at her doorstep? Because this is what I keep saying. Everything is put. I had a young lady come to me and tell me that her mom's boyfriend raped her.
mm.
And she said, and I said, well, when did the first time it happened? She said, I was 5.
Wow.
When she told her mother blamed her. Golly, that's
Because you
just
know why
crazy.
that is?
And I'm
Because
like, she was 5.
we have been socialized from the crib that we are responsible if somebody does something to us. As women, we are automatically taught that.
How do we, and I'm getting ready to tell her to come on in now, but I want to say, like, ask you, like, how do we turn the Titanic around? Because we see that this issue is happening. Um, and once I publicize these interviews, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of whatever, I don't really care
Sure.
about that. You know what I'm saying? And be, oh, you can't, that's the man of God. Well, the man of God should get pants. You
Well,
know,
you
you
said
know
it,
what I'm saying?
man of God, man of
Right.
God,
Right.
man.
Man, God should get past herself. He really should have known that she was underage and that was inappropriate, and all of these things. And so how do we turn the Titanic when we have these issues and we have them more often than not, which is really, really disheartening to me. And nobody is saying anything. And then when people do say something, they're crucified. So where do we start with the change? Like, where do we start?
Well, that's why I'm excited about this conversation. What we're doing is a part of the start. Start speaking up and speak up before somebody's assaulted. I'll give you a quick story, which is kind of comical, but it's representative of what we're talking about. I was in a church where I was sitting on a row and I could tell people were passing something down, and it was like elbowing and pass, elbow and pass. And it got to me, elbow and pass, and I realized somebody is passing a lap scarf, right? To
Yes.
somebody else, not to me because they know better, but somebody's passing a lap scarf. And I get the lap scarf and I look and I see where it's going. Apparently, there was a young lady who was visiting this particular church that I was at, and she was sitting a couple of pews over, like a row here, and a couple of pews over, and she had on a short skirt. And I saw that somebody was taking it upon themselves to cover her up. And when I saw where it was going, I yanked the scarf down and looked at the person who was expecting it and said, leave her alone, leave her alone. And everybody saw me do this, but it was very representative of the fact that I was not going to participate in this wrongness of what she was wearing.
Right.
And so I spoke up in that regard, and then I had to have a conversation afterward with another woman. And it was really just to say, we're perpetuating this idea that it's on her to protect somebody else's mind, somebody else's actions. She
Mhm.
probably got dressed and thought she looked cute. She
Right.
was
Oh,
showing.
that was all she had. You don't know that. Like you don't know if that was all. Because I had someone come to church with me one time. We went to
Hmm.
visit somewhere, and I'm coaching. I'm
Yeah.
old school. You know, my mama didn't play that. You
Yeah.
know, hey Stacy, Stacy's on
Hi,
the line.
Stacy. Good to
Hey,
see
hey,
you.
hey, and unmute your mic when you get ready. But I'm old school, so my mom was very, didn't play that, honey. You better cover up. Mom didn't play that. But I had a friend come with me, and we went to go and visit another church somewhere, and she was so embarrassed because the usher just came and threw something on her lap, and she's looking like, what's wrong? And the lady says, your skirt too short to be in the church, in the house of God. She was mortified, like she was so embarrassed, and I was like, oh my God, there was a better way to handle that. Like I'm like, we kind of just let that ride because you don't know where these people are
Right.
coming from. You
And
understand?
are they coming back if you've led them to feel that way? Probably
Right,
not.
right.
But what's the message we're sending? Your legs are evil. We see your
Mm-hmm,
legs. There is something wrong with you. Cover up.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
everywhere else in the world, God, people accept you. And if we're
Yeah.
going to be a place of acceptance and we're going to stop the beginning of this rape culture, we got to stop policing and sexualizing women's bodies. Because that's what we're doing. We're saying, oh, there's something sexual here, and
Mm-hmm,
she's just existing.
mm-hmm.
So speaking up at the beginning and just making that not okay is how we begin to do that. The other thing is when a man says something that's inappropriate, don't just accept it.
Yes. Don't laugh it off. Right.
Well,
And that's
don't laugh it off, but make it a thing. And I've done that in my own church as female clergy. I'm surrounded by men a lot of the time, right? And I'm surrounded by men. I may be detached from my husband because he's taking care of the kids while I'm ministering. And, people have said things. And so, you know what I did? I told our ministry coordinator, I told security, not that I couldn't handle it, but I want it to be a thing where men also take up the cause of women. And
mm-hmm.
I was affirmed in that. I was told that was inappropriate. We're going to handle it. I also told security. Security said, oh, well, whenever y'all are going into the crowd and praying, we will specifically keep an eye on women for people who don't know boundaries and try to get really touchy. So
Yes.
I made it a deal. I didn't make
Mm-hmm.
it something that you just have to deal with. I was like, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
letting you know because you all are in position to keep watch. So keep watch.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Amen.
more we talk about it, the more it becomes something that not just women are concerned about, but everybody is concerned about.
And I want to formally introduce. This is Stacy. Stacy. This is. I was getting ready to say Dr. Devona again. I'm
Reverend
just so
Devon is fine.
Reverend Devona. This is Reverend Devona. Stacey is joining the conversation. We interviewed her full testimony yesterday, which was actually the first time that she has actually spoke out publicly about the abuse that she endured at the hands of a minister of a youth pastor at her church. And she was. I'm not going to tell the story for you. My critique coach told me this morning that I talk too much. So I have to let my guests do all the talking. So I would love the two of you to dialogue. Stacey, is there any question that you have for Miss Devona, Reverend Devona, this afternoon?
Hi, Reverend Devona.
Hi,
Um,
Stacy.
how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. So my only question would be, what do I tell a young lady who has a similar circumstance and is afraid to speak out? That was my situation.
Got it. Before I answer your question, I do want to say I really appreciate, Stacy, your openness and your willingness to just outline what happened to you. It takes a lot of strength and courage to be so open, and I applaud you for it. And I'm praying for your continued strength because your story definitely helps somebody else and probably leads into your question. What do you say? whenever somebody tells me that they've been assaulted or violated in some way, the number one thing is of course, believe them unequivocally, right? I know people say, oh, people make things up. We're talking about less than 4% of people make up situations of sexual assault, and that is on par with every other crime that people make up happened. Okay. So there's not an abundance of it. So believe the person, number one. Remind them, tell them, emphasize it, get pom poms and say, it was not your fault.
Right.
You did not cause this. I don't care what you were wearing. I don't care if you had a crush. You did not cause this. And society tells us that it's always our fault. So however you can reinforce that this is not your fault, do that. And then recognize the need to say, I am sorry this happened to you. And then let them know that you don't have to be silent. You have options. Sometimes there's a legal option. There is an ecclesial option, right? And then there's a societal option. I mentioned earlier before you came on, Stacey, that I did justice work as a sexual assault therapist in addition to advocacy against sexual violence. And so perhaps we haven't built this up in the church, but definitely outside of the church, there are people who are willing to advocate for somebody who's been assaulted, who's been molested, who has been preyed upon. Because I throw that in there because maybe somebody's not underage, but they've still been subject to a sexual predator within the church under this power differential. There are people who can advocate and then help them navigate this system, this patriarchy that is unfortunately present in the church. Does that answer a part of your question? I'm sure there's more to it.
It definitely does. More so, how do you, without forcefully doing it, encourage them to actually speak up? My concern was actually telling, one, out of embarrassment, two, out of fear of people not believing me. How do you encourage them and get them to understand that the right thing to do is let it be known?
So this is a little bit challenging in the sense that from my background in sexual assault and justice work is that when somebody has been assaulted, power has been taken away from them. And so anything we can do to empower, and that's not give people power, that's show them access to their own power.
Right.
Anything we can do to empower them is it becomes a priority. And so it really is up to the survivor to decide how they want to handle it. Now, in wanting them to speak up and needing them to speak up, we can say, hey, you do have options that if you speak up, there are people who can back you. You don't have to stand alone. So that's the one thing. And then helping them see what those options are. Is it just legal? No, not necessarily. Is it ecclesial where we as a church need to come together and discuss it? Maybe. Or is it kind of this authoritative, like, okay, we're going to get some people who's stronger than you to go against this person. So just letting them see that there are options beyond just keeping silent is a way to encourage them to verbalize it a little bit more. There was a young lady I was aware of in the denomination I grew up in. Her way of speaking up was, as she got older, was to directly confront the gentleman, and I use that term carefully, to confront him whenever she was around him. So she wouldn't be silent. She wouldn't say, I'm gonna stand here with him. You know, she would make comments, perhaps inappropriate, not profane, but she would make comments to shift discomfort to him. It was like, if he's gonna be in this space with me in this church setting, I'm not gonna be uncomfortable. I'm going to let him be uncomfortable. Maybe I'm not going to say everything, but I'm going to let him know that I have power enough to blow all of this up. So back up off of me.
Right.
And so that was her way to deal with it. And it was a sight to watch, but he knew that at least where she was, he was not going to have power and be able to intimidate her. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. I'm from North Carolina originally. You see my sign there. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So giving the survivor as many options as possible for how they can deal with it, that can be a way to strengthen them enough to say, yes, this happened to me. That man is dangerous. That person is dangerous. They got to go.
Okay.
I wanted you to touch on something because we were talking about kind of like the root of how all of these how all of these things got started. Just with, power structure, male, female roles, gender, and all these things.
Hmm.
Today, 2020, how do we reconcile? Because one of the things I know that was going on with Stacey is that she was being accused of not forgiving, because as Christians, the Bible says forgive.
It
We
does.
don't deny that that's what that says. And but my argument was this: is it possible for me to forgive and still seek justice? Is it possible for me to forgive an assailant and still call the police? Like, is it possible? Because a lot of times, what's the struggle that I've seen with Stacey particularly, and women like her that's been put in that position, it's
Hmm.
almost like we gonna take the scripture and I'm gonna beat you over the head with it in order to try to get you to shut up, or like different abuses of the word of God. And it's like, no, this is not God's heart. God's heart, if we really want to talk about the word of God and the heart of God, God's heart does not align with
Hmm.
abuse.
Right. God is on the side of
So
the
can you
oppressed.
speak to that? Right. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. God is on the side of the oppressed, and we don't have to go far from page to page to see that God is a forgiving God and God is a just God. First
Right.
John 1 and 9, God is faithful and just to
Mm-hmm.
forgive us of our sins, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if God can be both, why can't we be both?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
want to say forgiveness is a divine process. Like when we say forgive, we are condensing an entire change of heart, change of mind, change of being. And we're asking people, oh, you need to do that in an instant and remove what the person has done to you. Well, we don't have that kind of power, whether it's sexual assault, whatever. We don't really have that kind of power to just forgive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a divine process that we need God to do our work. And then forgiveness is about us.
Right.
It's not about
Right.
the other person,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
right? So telling
Exactly.
me to forgive for them just doesn't make sense. That's
Right.
number one. I'm already in the process of forgiveness as I'm seeking justice, right? Because
Yes.
justice is not just for me to get what I need because I was hurt. Justice is for the other person. Justice is for the community. Justice is a call for reconciliation. So when
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling the police, I'm calling for you to see that you have hurt me, to
Right.
for you to see that you have not just hurt me, you have hurt the body of Christ.
Right.
So it
Right.
is perfectly fine to be on your way to forgiveness and seek justice in getting attention to what happened and getting authorities involved if a crime has been committed.
Right. Right. And I used this example before we went on, because I was like, okay, if someone comes in and robs your house and they hold you and your family at gunpoint, and they take everything, they take all your money, they take your car. No, I want you to give yourself the forgiveness speech now,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to forgive, but I bet you go call 911. I
And
bet you go call police.
yeah, and let me point out, God forgiving us does not always, sometimes it does,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always take away consequences.
Absolutely.
I
Right.
mean, Adam and Eve were forgiven and they had to leave the garden
Yes.
nonetheless.
Yes. Yes.
So there will be
Yes.
consequences and you can receive forgiveness, but we
Right.
can't get away from consequences. It's like, sow and reaping. There are some natural laws that are in place that you do this, then this is going to happen. And we
Right.
can't take that away from people at
Right.
all.
Right. I'm sorry. You look like you had a question, Stacey. You got a question?
No, I don't.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
okay. I'm sorry for a second. I just jump right in and just be talking, and I don't want to talk over
Oh,
people.
no,
My coach told me I have to let my guests talk. So,
well,
so
I want to go back to something you said,
please.
Kira, with the metaphor of somebody breaking into your house. Often when it comes to sexual assault, metaphor can be very helpful in helping people understand it. So if somebody breaks into your house, right? You probably weren't there. All of this crime happens. We don't tell the person who owns the house, well, why did you have blue doors on your house? We don't say, well, why did you have a house on that block in the first place? Well, what did you do to make somebody break into your house? We don't blame them. We don't say, well, that's just what happens. Robbers exist, so you just got to deal with the fact that people are going to break in your
Yep.
house. We
Right.
don't do that at all with
Right.
any other crime except when it comes to sexual assault. Well, what were you wearing? Did you like him? Were you hanging around him? What did you say? What did you do? Well, how many people have you been with before?
Yes.
We don't say how many houses have you owned before. We don't do that. And
Right.
so when we're looking at how we work with survivors, we got to treat it like any other offense.
Mhm.
Like, this happened to you not because of you, but because of what was in that person's heart. I mentioned, Stacey, that there are Peters and Judases. You got people who just don't know. Some people don't know it's inappropriate to be commenting on my body, right?
Mhm.
So we deal with the Peters by educating and reprimanding. Then you got the Judases who just gonna do wrong. We need to get them out.
Right.
We need to get them
Can,
out.
can you talk to me about, we were talking about grooming the other day,
Yes.
signs of grooming. And when we were talking about the incident that we were interviewing for, you made a statement about, oh, this is textbook. This is textbook grooming. Can you, for parents that may be watching, so and teenagers that may be watching, because I would, suggest that parents would watch this with their children,
Male and female children.
male and female, because there is no discrimination when it comes to this thing. Can you speak to the grooming process that predators usually use, especially in the faith? Because in her interview, you'll see where she talked about basically how he was telling her that what he was doing to her was an ordained thing of God, that God, so all of these things. So can you talk about that, please?
Yeah. So when we're talking about grooming, this process is what sexual predators do to make their potential victim more comfortable. It's a way to relax boundaries and basically to manufacture trust from people. And it's not just with the person that they're preying upon, it's also with the community. And we've seen it a lot where it starts with the community. Somebody comes in and I'm, Mr. Personality, I'm everybody. That's fine because we all like that person. But then, hey, I want to work with the youth. Okay, fine. That's great because we need male role models. We need people who are in corporate America, people who are doing things. That's great. And then, what from a groomer's perspective, you start looking at who is uncovered. You look at people who are in need of more attention. When it's talking about children, we look at children as a groomer. You look at children who, I don't know, have mismatched socks, or maybe their hair is not done. Because what that suggests is that some adult is not paying close enough attention, and this child might be in need of emotional care or just attention. So that becomes a target for a groomer because nobody's going to notice, or somebody's going to be so grateful that they have help taking care of their children. That's kind of the trajectory of, okay, so now I make this child trust me. I make the adults around trust me with this child. And then the conversation shifts. Maybe we're all talking about school, and then maybe I take you aside because I'm the predator. I take you aside and ask you how things are going. I give you the specialized attention, and then I start asking you about your romantic relationships. Now, it could be too early, 11, 12. It could be too early, really, for the child to really be thinking about it in a serious way. But this responsible, trusted adult is now guiding the conversation deeper toward sexual things. And, well, are you thinking about having sex? Are you thinking about this? Well, you can trust me. And this groomer is trying to build this relationship, and then it becomes, well, you can trust me to, well, if you think you ever want to do anything, you should probably do it with me because you know that I'll take care of you. And everybody already trusts this individual. So, hey, do you need a ride home from school? You know what? I can drive you around. I want to pause there. Stacey, I see your acknowledgement, or your head is shaking. What's coming up for you?
These are all things that happened in my situation. They're all very similar to the things that happened in my situation, starting with even my mom worked a lot and I spend all of my free time at church, all
Mhm.
of my free time. And so it would be questions like the questions you just gave example of. It would be, there was somebody I had a crush on at the
Mhm.
time in youth ministry, and the person who abused me would always comment to me, "You're too pure, you're too sweet, you're too holy." And because I always made it a stance to say I want to remain pure until I am married. And he would
Mhm.
always say to me, the guy that you want is not going to wait on it. So you're going to have to start giving it up before you can even try to get with him. He would say things like that. And it was always so weird to me because he was the youth pastor, and I didn't understand it at the time.
Mhm.
And so hearing you say that makes me
Right.
think about that. And he would,
Absolutely.
"Do you need a ride here? Oh, I'm gonna pick you up." Or where it was like anywhere I was going, he wanted to be that transportation before I got a car. And then
Right.
when I got a car, he wanted me to be his transportation. It was like, you want to be everywhere I am for some odd reason, and I'm trying to pull away because of everything that is going on, and I don't know how to express myself to other people, and you're telling other people I'm pulling away from you because I'm doing all these things that you are encouraging me to do, when in reality I'm not doing any of it.
Right. Well, that's also a part of the grooming process. Now that I have your trust, I need to isolate you somehow so that you can't step outside of this connection, right? And that can happen in a number of ways. It's the let me tell a story out here and then protect you from that story as if, hey, you know, people are talking about you, so you can't go talk to them. Or it's let me get into your family system because everybody in your family now trusts me, and let me participate perhaps in the family bullying that might go on, and then comfort you over here so you can't go to your family, you can only come to me. Or let's say we're talking teenagers here, you do the natural thing and you get a partner, you get a boyfriend. Let me get in the middle of this relationship and start telling you how your boyfriend is not man enough for you, or he's cheating on you, or you can't trust him, but you can only trust me. So there is this building trust. It's crossing boundaries subtly just to see how you react. Like had he crossed a sexual boundary with a comment and you were like, what, that's wrong, he would have backed up, right? But because the trust was there, okay, she was fine with that. Let me push it a little more. Let me keep pushing boundaries. There's that. And then there's this isolation so that if you tell anybody, unless you tell the whole story and it sounds all confusing, nobody's going to believe you.
Yep.
And more than likely, and I said this when I first heard parts of your story, I said, she wasn't the only one.
Right.
And kind of like I'm doing now, I'm kind of naming things that predators do, not knowing, I just met you, and not knowing the assailant, because this is just what predators do. They seek after people who seem to need something, they provide the need, and then they take it too far, right? Those are
Woo!
the Judases.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And so what do you do
it's
with
the
the Judas?
Peter
Because they,
it's the Peters who make the Judases possible. So we got to tell the Peters, hey, why is this man hanging around these people? Who is his backup? What is he doing? And more than likely with a sexual predator, he's not just preying on young people. He's also preying on older people who are in need emotionally. This is the man, and I keep using gendered language because statistics do show that men are more likely to commit sexual assault than women, even though women do. But for our purposes, this is the man who also notices the old ladies who don't have anybody seeing about them and taking care of them. So he befriends them. Why? Because they got daughters. And why? Because those daughters have daughters. You never see this man buddying up to a nuclear family where men are present, right? Or if this man has male friends, which he does, these Peters of the group congratulate him on how all the young women seem to flock after him.
wow. Wow.
Y'all have seen this before, right?
Yes.
And we're talking about different areas of the country.
Wow.
So I need Mr. Peter to be like, hey, yo, that's not cool.
Right.
Why are you hanging around these young women?
Right.
Why? And yeah, that's cute that she has a crush on you, and that's what people do, right? People get crushes. That is totally fine. That doesn't mean that this grown adult male has to respond to it.
Right. Right.
So the more we talk about it, what do? The more we talk about it and educate the Peters, the more we have people who become Jesus and start blocking some of this stuff, where
Mm-hmm.
they start allowing justice to go forward. No, sir, you cannot be on our team anymore. No, sir, you have to sit down. No, we're referring you to counseling services or you got to go. One of the most affirming things I ever encountered when I was at a church in Virginia, I was having a conversation with the pastor, and he was telling me a story of a man just like that who seemed to be preying upon the women in the church. He said, I told him he had to leave. I said, Pastor, you put him out the church? He said, I absolutely did. And we
Mm-hmm.
need more men like that who
Absolutely.
will say, this is not right. He has to go. Instead of the pat on the back, hey, man, that's how it is. No, that has to stop. And it goes all the way back to, even as women, we have to stop the internalized misogyny. I've never had a man put a scarf, try to give me a lap scarf.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And we accuse one another a lot in because even in her Stacy's particular situation, his quote unquote team, the predator's team, were mostly women.
Mm-hmm.
Women in ministry,
Yeah.
women who lead other women were actually a large part of his support. So even other women doing this to other women, and women who would admittedly say, oh yeah, we know he did it. Sure, yeah. But it seems to be okay, even among women, that this is something. As she had an incident, and I always go back to her because she's here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
who's watching and they're dealing with this. But she says she first told a woman in ministry, and the lady said, "I believe you, but don't tell anybody."
Right.
So where do we as women in the faith, women in ministry, have a responsibility too?
Yes.
Can you speak to that a bit?
We have to take the risk, right? And it's easier sometimes when we're talking about gender violence, because this is what this is, to compare it to racial violence. Proximity to whiteness in our society is seen as more powerful, right? Whether you're lighter skinned, whether you have money, that's a proximity to power. And some people, when they're that close to power, they've attained it some kind of way, they don't want to give that up. So go back into the church, the Black church in particular, especially in this patriarchal system. Some of us as women, we've gotten some power as clergy, and we're proximate to power, and to speak up compromises that access.
Mm-hmm.
Think about me passing that lap scarf. I made a stand and I dared somebody, and this is
Right.
probably my disposition too, but I dared somebody to challenge me on the fact that not only was I not going to pass this lap scarf, from that day on, regardless of what I'm wearing, depending on my own comfort, I will not use a lap scarf.
Mm-hmm.
And people know, do not give Devona one. I don't care if her skirt is up to her behind, that wouldn't happen. But
Right.
I am
Right.
not going to even appear to perpetuate these standards. And so I'm taking the personal risk, if you will, to be crucified, to be talked about, because I know that inherently my body is not evil.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then there was Mother's Day a couple of years ago. I have two 7-year-olds, one boy, one girl. I had this very cute dress that I was wearing, and it showed a little cleavage. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pin this. And my daughter asked me, are you doing that? She was 6 at the time. She was like, are you doing that because you don't want people to see your breasts? I said to her, no, actually, I don't care, but I recognize that this might make somebody mad. So the only reason I'm pinning my dress is to avoid making people mad. But me showing my breast in an appropriate way was not a problem, but I was very clear about what I was doing and why. So again, I take the risk, and then I put that conversation on Facebook so people would know. But I take the risk to say, I am not going to follow the rules of oppression that I was taught. I don't wear pantyhose, for example. When I was ordained as a Baptist minister, I found a clergy dress. right? Because I am a woman, I have a woman's body. And so this dress showed my figure appropriately, but I was being ordained and I wanted it to be very clear that I am not trying to show my access to power by dressing as I have been told to dress. I am dressing as me, as God made me, and I am a woman. Deal with it. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to take that risk. Those of us with power, we've got to use our power responsibly.
I do have another question. If someone is watching, where can they go? Is there a, I mean, I know you have counseling, whatever. Is there information that you could give where people can say, hey, I can call this person, I can call this organization, and get the help that I need. I'm gonna put my email down. I know Stacy has an organization as well, but can you give us some information about any organizations that can help serve women who have been in this position?
Sure. In Illinois, there's something called the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault, ICASA. Something like that exists in every state, believe it or not.
Okay.
And in Illinois, ICASA centers, Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault, will provide sexual assault advocacy work, legal work, and counseling services free of charge or at a low cost. So if you call one of those sites in your state, they will be able to connect you to a center that provides sexual assault assistance all the way from the emergency room up until walking you to court if it gets to that. They provide counseling that will tell you, I'm sorry this happened to you. It's not your fault. I believe you, and you have options, and they'll give you those options. The other thing, there are women of color in ministry and women in ministry who we do the justice work on behalf of women. We do dismantle patriarchy. We do see the Bible as the liberating work that it is. And that's liberation not just against racial oppression, but gender oppression. So there are people out there who know that this is happening and fight against it every day, even from a womanism perspective, where sermons are not bashing women and telling people what women should do, but highlighting the contribution of women to our faith. And the more we see that, the more we can stand up and be powerful and be like, you can't treat me like this.
Right. Right.
Like, of
Because that
course,
was never God's original intention. That was never God. That whole, I could go into a whole sermon about that, and I'm not going to do that because that's not what this is about. But just knowing that we do have voices and that we are important to God, and we were not an afterthought to God. You
right.
are not God's last resort. I ain't got nothing to do, so I might as well throw this thing together and put it on out there. That was not God. I am God's beloved. So
Right.
that this woman that's sitting home that feels like nobody believes you, no, honey, you are God's beloved. You are radiant because God made you radiant, and you do have a voice. And there is power in my sister has a 2-year-old daughter. My older sister, Carmen,
Yeah.
has the baby. She's 2. And so she's just a little feisty little something. And my sister always said, because she'll cry, I need help. And my sister never gets emotional when she says, listen, your words are powerful. Use your words. And so the baby, she comes out, I need help. You need help with what? I want to have water. Okay, then let's go get the water. She said, you see how powerful. So my sister does that to her 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Words are powerful. You have to say how you feel. You don't have to cry. You don't have to be flustered. No, your words have power. So my sister's doing that to her 2-year-old. Okay. Yeah. So I say that to the women that are watching this and to the men that's watching this. And I don't want to make this a male-female thing in effect of abuse, because you do have a lot of young men that unfortunately have been abused as well. So I'm gonna put the information that you gave me in the description box once we post everything with Miss Devona's information that she gives. If you guys have any questions, please do not sit silent. You do have options. You have people who will believe you. Stacy also has an organization where she deals and helps young ladies who specifically have dealt with abuse in the church. You have options. You don't have to go through this by yourself. You have people who believe you, who will hear you, and who will walk through it with you.
Yes.
So, is there any final words anybody wanted to say before we ended this?
Yeah, let me say this, and we really have to deal with the shame that comes along with the survivor saying, "Oh, but I appreciated the attention. I liked him. I enjoyed this." When we're talking about people in power, we're talking about clergy. This is not an equal relationship, right? There is a power differential where the responsibility is on the person in power. So, of course, you're going to enjoy the attention. Of course, you're going to enjoy what looks like the benefits, right? Try not to feel the shame of that. That was the intent of the predator in the first place, to lure you in. So if you can reduce that shame, that also, Stacey, to your question, might give people the power to speak up. It's like, of course, there were things I enjoyed, but that doesn't mean this person in power had the right to use their power against me for their own fulfillment. So I just want to highlight the shame of what the survivor might experience, and to tell them they can break free from that. That can be broken.
Amen.
I want to say to the people who the survivor may come to be careful with your words. I know for me, things I was asked were things like, well, why were you over there? Did you think he was your man? Why'd you let it happen so long? Why are you just now saying something? Those were questions that were asked to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they always caught me off guard because it did take me so long to finally build up the courage to say something who I really, really trusted. And for her response to be some of those things, it hurt just as much as what he'd done.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I just want people to be mindful of those things, because for me, I wasn't promiscuous. I didn't wear short skirts and I didn't show my cleavage, and I didn't, I never came on to him. So for me, I looked at this person as a godfather, and a godfather would never do the things that he did.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, well, why am I being treated as if I did something wrong?
Right. And research shows that the trauma of assault has to do a lot more sometimes with the response when the person tells the first, they notify the first person.
Yes.
And so the response, just to reiterate, if somebody comes to you, it's, I believe you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. It wasn't your fault. Let's talk about your options.
Right.
That's
Right.
the whole response. Those
That's
four
the
things.
script, people. That's the script. That's what you say. All the other stuff. Like, no. How can we be supportive? How can we? I'm not there to push you faster than you willing to go, but I'm not willing to hold you back either. I'm walking at your pace, but
Yes.
just know that you have somebody in your corner. Just know that I do believe you. Just know that I'm not going to try to force feed something on you. And then, and then looking at you like, well, why won't you do this? Well, no. This is a process. We have to learn how to be what we say we believe.
Right.
As Christians. We got to be what we say we believe.
Right. And if you have power in your faith organization, use it to start the conversation before it ever comes up. For example, I was teaching a class, and this was the class on worship before the pandemic. When I introduced myself and said, I am Reverend Devona Aline, I'm a licensed therapist, I'm a part of the clergy team here. Know that you can come to me outside of class, and if somebody tells me that there's an issue of sexual assault, as a member of the clergy, I am going to take it seriously. I'm going to take it somewhere. So I'm letting you all know, even though that's not what we're talking about, not what we're here for, that I am a person you can come to, and here's how it's going to be handled.
Wow.
Just add that to your introduction.
Yeah.
Let people know that this is a safe place for disclosure, because you might be the first person that the person has ever heard say that.
Yep.
And because it's going on. But if we say it first, now people know who to go to.
Yep.
That's excellent. I have learned a lot today. Thank you so much, Reverend Devona, Doctor. Yeah, I'm gonna keep calling you Doctor. We gonna speak that thing.
One more year. One more year.
And Stacey again, who is a champion of this
Absolutely.
entire thing. I've never seen anybody go through what she has gone through with the grace that she has done it. I have not seen anybody go through it with this kind of grace. So kudos to you. And we're going to keep this conversation going. This is not going to be the last time that we deal with this, and we're going to keep talking about it until we see the dismantling of that demonic system come completely down.
Amen.
So I love y'all. I love y'all. Thank you guys for joining me on the Jones Girl Live. This is my platform where I am a storyteller. I tell all types of stories, and I like to do it in different creative ways and things like that. But my point and my goal is to always motivate and encourage women to live their God-given lives. So we'll see y'all next time, all right?
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.